been looking forward to this show, Ken. I used to be so Catholic, small c, in my approach that I would never commit to liking one coffee over another. After all the coffees I've had, I think Sumatra is, for some reason, I keep coming back to it. It's something that really fascinates me. It's a coffee I don't fully understand, however, which is why it's a perfect show for us to work on together.
The character of Sumatras is a bit of a mystery. I mean, we know, as I'll go on, that it's the processing method, how the fruit is removed from the bean and how they're dried, that's what unique to Sumatra. It's not the air, it's not the dirt, it's the processing method, and has nothing to do with tree variety, because there's a whole range of tree varieties in Sumatra, and none of them particularly well known for their distinctive profile. So it's the processing method. I think there's a mystery, and unraveling the mystery has been a sort of adventure in specialty coffee. And of course, many people don't know about the unraveling. It's kind of a misunderstood process, but this process called wet hulling, which we'll be talking about. At any rate, I think that the mystery of that is one fascination for specialty coffee people, and for consumers, I think it's just that Sumatras traditionally taste very different from, say, Central American origins or most African origins. They taste really different from almost all other origins. It made it easy to be a connoisseur. Say, oh, this is a Sumatra. I remember many times doing that, and everybody's so surprised. Well, of course it's a Sumatra, because there's no other coffee that tastes like it. Let me just clarify that other islands in Indonesia, other growing regions, do wet hulling also. But the process is most associated with Sumatra.
So is a Papua New Guinea or, let's say, a Sulawesi, they wet hulled as well?
Well, perhaps I can show a map and talk about that. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Pulled out this rather funky map here, because part of the mystery of Sumatra is that tourists don't go there except to see orangutans. I mean, it's a fascinating and wonderful place, but it just hasn't hit the circuit, as it were. All of this is Indonesia. From the border here between the Indonesia province and Papua New Guinea, which is the green. All the yellow part here is all Indonesia. Sumatra is the big island over here. Java, of course, where coffee was first grown by the Dutch, and which gave its nickname to coffee, is right in here. This is Java. And then Bali, the only place that Americans go, or anybody goes to Indonesia usually, is to go to Bali, which is right at the tip here. Throughout these islands, there's wet hulled coffee produced, but it's a specialty in particular of Sumatra. And now it's being done in Java again, some very fine wet hulled Javas. The wet hulling creates aromatic notes, complexes, that are largely unpredictable or predictable within a fairly wide range. Wet hulling is processing wrinkle. It's basically the wet method is the classic method of removing fruit and drying coffee. And it involves immediately after picking or soon after removing all of the fruit residue and leaving only a skin that's called a parchment skin. There's also the silver skin, which is very thin and comes off during roasting. But the parchment skin is a kind of a woody layer with no sugars and really doesn't affect the taste of the coffee at all. So typically, all the soft fruit residue is removed from the coffee, but the parchment skin is left on. And it's dried, the coffee is dried in parchment, as we say, in the parchment skin, and then it's often stored in the parchment skin. The parchment dries out. It's kind of a crumbly layer. It pops off easily. Take it off with your hands. So it's stored often in parchment skin, and then it's removed before shipping. And that process creates the classic clean tasting coffee. The nature of the coffee fruit as it's imparted to the seeds tends to be clear. So if we have a very beautiful wet processed coffee, we get some of the quality of the actual fruit, which is sweet tart fruit tastes, and we get floral notes that seem to be carried into the seed. All of that's very clean, and if there are chocolate notes that are brought out by the roast, that's fine. There are, of course, always caramelly notes and so on. But if you have a coffee that's not clean, you get other notes. In the case of the wet-hulled coffee, the parchment skin is removed while the coffee is still wet. That's why it's called wet. So the coffee is dried without the parchment skin. And that seems like a simple, that shouldn't have much effect. But it is, in effect, what creates the taste of a Sumatra.
Ken, nobody does this outside of Sumatra or the Indonesia, certainly. Is that what you're saying? It's just not common
Yes.
anywhere else?
No. I mean, it's done as an experiment. I mean, the Chinese have tried it. I suppose you could maybe find on the green market a wet-hulled Chinese coffee. I certainly have had friends, kind of researchers, who have tried it. People in Hawaii, where it's easy to do. And I've tasted coffees that taste very much like Sumatra that were experimentally processed. I think the problem is that in order to remove that parchment skin, which is still moist, from the beans without damaging them, requires a special machine with kind of rubber nubs. And so people don't invest in that machine. And that, of course, that's the reason why Sumatra beans often look a little funky, is because they get nicked up a little bit in that process. Sumatras tend to be dried in stages. First, before they remove the parchment skin, then after, usually in a mill up in the mountains, and then the final drying is done in the port, usually of Medan. What you get, technically, is mustiness, like mildew. So a bad Sumatra, in which this process has not worked, tastes and smells like mildewed clothes in the basement.
Well, look,
When
we've all
in
done
fact,
that. I've forgotten to press it's as simple for me as I've forgotten to press the button to start it.
Right,
I've got everything,
right.
all
To
the
start
settings
it.
right.
That's right. That's right. You open it up and you expect this nice,
Yeah.
fresh smelling, and instead you get the mildew.
Right.
And the technical term in traditional coffee business is musty. That mustiness, combined with other characteristics of the coffee, produces this big range of interesting notes. Earthy, right?
Yes.
In other words, it tastes like the smell of, say, fresh humus, clay, like that fresh scent of clay if you're working with clay on a potter's wheel. It's also associated with a note, a very fine and elegant note called petrichor. Petrichor is the scent of earth that's dry and been baked by the sun and then rained on. The smell of the fresh rain. So almost everybody has smelled it. They just didn't know that they were smelling petrichor. And so if you have a light rain after on a hot day or warm day, you'll get that wonderful fresh odor. And the very best Sumatras probably today, you maybe have this petrichor note. When you combine the elegant mustiness with other notes that are inherent in Arabica coffee, you get surprises. A lovely palette of often surprising notes. So that's the story of Sumatra and wet-hulled coffee.
Please like and subscribe if you want to see more shows like this.